welcome to the Selling North Georgia podcast. I'm Corey Shields.
Michael Williams.
That's Michael Williams. And we are here with Hannah Rogers with Movement Mortgage.
Hello.
And so we're just going to have a discussion with her, see what she's all about, and talk about lending in general in today's market. So, Hannah?
Okay, so I actually was a real estate agent before I was a lender, and did that about, 7 years ago. Was a real estate agent for several years, did pretty well, actually really loved my job. But I have 4 kids, and I was really tired of being on the roads nights and weekends and never seeing my family. So decided to make the switch over to being a lender, or as we call it, a loan officer. And I'm able to see my kids. I still work all the
over
time.
the top of your laptop,
Yes,
right?
exactly. So I am at the baseball games and the gymnastics meets, but yes, with my laptop most of the time. I started out with someone else and then decided to go off by myself. And it was actually like a pivotal moment. It was like invest in my business, spend a little bit of money to market and to do more, or to just go work for someone else again. And so we took the chance. We hired a marketing person, Amanda Hackett. Y'all see her on our stuff. And realized quickly that 10 hours a week was not gonna cut it. So she actually became a licensed loan officer as well. So she's joined the team, and we just have her do a little bit of everything. And then we have our own assistant and processor. We're great friends, which really makes things work.
What would you say is making your team stand out from the rest? Because, I mean, you can go a million different places and get your FHA loan or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you feel like is your competitive advantage there?
So I could really talk about a lot of different things with that. I think our first one would be that we're available. So there's a lot of lenders who, you're out looking at a house on the weekend, they didn't do their homework first and get pre-approved, and now they want to buy a house all of a sudden. So we're available. I'm going to take that application on a Saturday and get them approved. If you're working with a bank, you're not going to get that. Like, they're not going to get back to you until Monday at 9 o'clock probably. Mm-hmm. If you're working with an online lender, you will get that. You will get a quick approval. The problem is it's not going to be a legitimate approval. You probably haven't submitted your documentation. They really don't know what your income is, so they're telling you, oh yeah, you can go buy a $300,000 house, but they've not looked at anything. And so their pre-approval letters do not stand out. They're not accepted generally. If you guys are out making an offer to someone and they see a Movement Mortgage, Rogers Lending Team versus Rocket Mortgage, well, most people in our community know that I look at their income, I've looked at their credit, and I'm not sending a letter without seeing those items first.
And I think that weekend availability is crucial now, especially now with
Yes.
Multiple offers. And like you said too, if you got 5 different offers and you got a few Rocket Mortgages and whatever, and then you've got a solid lender, that could be the difference maker.
Yes.
I tell people all the time that the lender is the biggest difference maker. Like, it's important to have a good realtor, but it's way more important to have a good lender. If you have a bad lender, you usually don't know that until it's too late.
Yes.
Right? Like, when you find out that's a bad lender is when it's too late. So
Right.
I say that all the time. But one of the things I have to say is a funny story about you. I had a friend of mine that was working with you on a refinance, and so I didn't know much about the process, and so he calls me one morning about 9:30, and it's like, hey, what's the deal with this Hannah girl? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, I'm laying in bed last night, it's 10:15, and my phone dings, and I roll over and I look at it, and it's Hannah, and my wife's like, who's that? I'm like, it's Hannah. And then my wife's like, well, who's Hannah? And like gets all tore up about it. And so he has to go through this long explanation that it's okay, honey. She's literally asking me for W-2s. It's totally fine.
It's like the State Farm guy.
So, yeah, that's right. It's Jake from State Farm.
Yeah. What is an aspect of getting a mortgage that you feel like you wish more people knew about, that is just, for some reason, most people don't know about?
Okay, before you ever even think about being a first-time home buyer, the first thing that you should be thinking about is your credit scores. And that's not taught in school. Like, people don't realize how important their credit scores are. So just a couple of things to hit on. Pay your bills. Like, the biggest thing is, like, if you have a credit card and it has a $5,000 balance, I'm not asking you to pay $1,000 a month. Like, pay the minimum $25. We're not asking you to pay ahead. yes, if you pay down bigger chunks and you get your balance below 50% of what's allowed, your score is going to go up quicker. But if you just pay your bills, your score is not going to go down. So that's a key. Another thing is, people say, oh, I want to pay all cash for everything. I don't want to have debt. That's actually hurting you because you don't have a credit score. So there again, do get a credit card. Use your credit card responsibly. Always try to keep it paid down below 50%. What I suggest is only put things on it that you already have the money set aside for. So buy your gas and your groceries, things you have to have on a credit card, pay that off each month. Don't go and put lots of crazy things that you don't need on a credit card, because then that's when
85-inch TV.
Yeah, that. Because that's when you get in trouble. So that is the very first thing before you ever even think about being a first-time home buyer.
To go back to the folks who say, oh, I want to pay cash for everything, and they don't have credit established yet. I don't know how much truth there is in this, but I've heard people in that boat say, well, I tried to establish credit and get a credit card, but I got denied it, so how am I even supposed to establish credit? Is there a recommended path that you have for that? Or?
Yeah, so there's really kind of a difference in having no credit and having bad credit. It is more difficult to get a credit card if you have bad credit. Generally, you're going to have to get a secured credit card where you're going to have to front the money first. Like you put $500 out, that's the credit limit you're using. You're just reusing your $500 basically. You can also, with no credit, for me, so I think back, okay, whenever I was 18, what did I do? I got a store credit card. I don't suggest store credit cards, but that's where I started. I worked at Belk, and you had to have a credit card to work there because that's how you got your employee discount. So,
wow.
Yeah. And so, I didn't get denied. It was like $200 that I had, but start small. And like I said, I know credit cards are terrible, but if you use them wisely.
This show is sponsored by Dave Ramsey.
But they are very useful. They're great to build your credits. So that would be where I would start for sure. Again, 0 score is better than a bad score.
What's a bad score so people have a reference?
So we cannot do a loan at all under 580. It's going to be very difficult for you under 600, 620. We can do it, but you're going to have a down payment. There are absolutely no zero down options for those scores. And you're going to have 2 to 3 months of reserves so that if something happens, you lose your job, whatever, we know that you can still make your payment for a few months and catch up.
So if I have a 510, how did that happen?
You probably didn't pay your bills.
How do I improve my credit when I have a 510 score?
So you
pay
go,
your bills.
Yeah,
That's
exactly,
a good start.
Exactly. And I'll say medical collections, we really don't hit those against you. We don't tell you to go pay those off. They may have got your score in the position they're in, so now you need to build positive credit, but we're not dinging you for those. It's just your score is what it is because of those.
Okay. And so to kind of transition from the first-time buyer crowd to maybe the people who have done it a time or two, do you, as a loan officer, how do you approach those buyers differently? What needs do you feel like the experienced buyer has that you focus on, unlike the first-timers?
So I think one thing is still people going into it thinking they need the large down payments. And they think if they're selling their house, I should put the full $200,000 profit on my new house. Is that necessarily the best thing to do? Money's cheap. So just kind of educating them at all their options. Maybe they want to use their money to invest or do something else, or maybe they buy their next house and buy an investment, kind of split their assets. So I think just educating them on wealth building and not just looking at it as a single purchase.
Sure.
And again, a lot of people still even don't realize they need agents. Even they think, oh, I can sell my house on my own, and you're going to get a lot more money if you use an agent. So kind of just talking through, reminding them the steps of the process and what the best thing is for them on how to use their finances.
Sure. So make sure I understand. Basically, you're saying especially when interest rates are as low as they are now, money being so cheap, it's not always the best decision to put in all your proceeds from a sale.
Yeah.
Probably better use for that money.
Yes,
Right.
most definitely.
Good time to put the disclosure out there that we are not financial advisors. Please contact your
Yeah.
That is true.
financial
Yeah, good call,
advisor
good call.
if you are interested in building wealth.
This is
That
for
is true.
entertainment purposes only.
That's the phrase I'm looking for. Entertainment
There you
purposes.
go. Opinions only here.
That's right.
No facts. So I had buyers 3 years ago who getting a loan, putting 5% down, clear to close, closing in 3 days. calls me and they say, I won the lottery. I don't need the loan anymore. And I'm like, what? Is this a joke? Like, and I was a new loan officer.
Literally won the lottery.
Literally
Awesome.
won the lottery, yes.
Wow.
And so I was new. And so at first I'm like, what do I say? Like, I still need this loan, you know? So the people who I was working with, they were like, money's cheap. Like we just said, like, tell them do not go and pay cash for a house, because I think they won like $300,000. So not a ton, but still a lot. You know,
Different
free
than
money.
30 million.
Yeah, exactly. So their house was $250,000. They were going to put almost all of it on their house. So they absolutely, positively were paying for the house cash. Like, would not hear any other way. And you know, we tried to recommend like invest or do this or do that. Nope, not having it. So now they call me back 3 years later. They're ready to sell their house and want to buy a new house. And the conversation is, hey, can we buy without selling our house? We don't have any debt on our house. We bought it free and clear. Well, they have a $900 car payment, and they have a $400 car payment, and they have a $500 camper payment. They have about $175,000 worth of debt between those three.
Ugh.
So instead of having a 2.5 interest rate on a 15-year, even we'll say, you know, whatever, they chose instead to pay cash for the house, and now they're paying really high interest rates for all of their automobiles and RVs. So just kind of interesting. That was not a wise use of their money.
Yeah, no, that story is very relevant to what we were talking about.
Yes.
That nailed it, actually.
All right, so what do you want to tell our Selling North Georgia fan base of 6 million or maybe 6 people?
It's got to be 7 million by now. This thing's really taken off.
So I would say it's important to find a good lender who's going to communicate, who is going to answer your questions, who's going to educate you, and again, make sure you have great agents. I've got 2 guys right here who are ready to take care of you. So the perfect recipe for the home buying process: good agent and good lender. If you have those 2 things, it should be a breeze through the process.
Totally agree. One thing I'll add to that is don't always get caught up in one thing or the other. So like, for example, I hear people all the time get caught up on the interest rate. Well,
Yes.
I can get a 2.7 over here, I can get a 2.4 over here. And then you look at the estimate sheet and they've
Yes.
got like $20,000 worth of closing costs, and you're like, well, yeah, they're buying the rate down. You know,
Yes.
like, what does it mean to buy the rate down, and how do you analyze your offering versus another offering that may have no closing costs or whatever? How do we do that?
So for me, what I tell my clients whenever they call me and they say, hey, what's the interest rate? Well, a lot of different things go into that. So I'm not one to just like throw off a rate. I'm also not one that's going to be like, hey, the rate's 2.5%. And I know behind the scenes, I'm charging you $4,000 to get that. So that's what Michael's referring to, is you can buy down the rate, or we call those discount points. So you can get any rate that you want, but you're going to pay for it. So I tell my clients, whenever I quote you an interest rate, that is what the rate is at no cost to you. So I may tell you that your rate is 2.75. But there's no fees added in. We have our flat $11.95 lender fee, nothing else other than typical closing costs. And so if the bank says we're giving you 2.5, I'm going to look at that rate sheet and we're going to see, okay, well, they're charging you this. I can give you that too, but here's what it's going to cost you. So you have to compare apples to apples.
Yeah, a lot of times we will deal with lenders those online lenders will say
Yes.
0 closing costs, right?
Yes.
But then you look at it and the rate's 3.1 when you're charging a 2.75, and
Yes.
it's like, oh, well, then you're paying for it
Yeah.
in the interest rate. So
Well,
they're
and the
boosting
same
interest
thing
rate.
is the flip side of that is they'll quote a really low interest rate online, and again they have all these fees built in, and a lot of times they're not locking you until just before they have to send out their initial CD. So by the time you've got to that end of the process and you see your initial CD, oh, and they've just locked the rate and all these fees are there, you never knew it.
I see ads all the time on Facebook where they'll have the rate mentioned, and then in the small print, like a 6 font, it says rate as of the date that they started running the ad.
Yes.
And so the date is like a week ago. You know,
Yes.
I'm like, wait a minute.
Yes.
It's, as of last week, it was this.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, because if I quote you an interest rate today, I can't promise you that rate tomorrow. Rates change daily, and
Sometimes intraday.
yes, exactly. So whenever things were really volatile last year, we got multiple emails a day. Rates are up, rates are down. In a matter of 24 hours, rates went up an entire point. And the way the market shifts generally, 1/8 of a point to a quarter is
That's a
usually, yeah. So to go an entire point in 24 hours, I mean, and people were like, what do you mean? I had a couple of people pretty mad, but There was nothing I could do.
Do people ask you on a daily basis what's going to happen to interest rates?
Oh, they do. But I'm not a mind reader, or else I would be very rich.
I
So,
believe that's the correct answer.
you know, I tell people this is the trend that I have seen. Like, recently, we haven't really increased or decreased by more than 1/4 of a point here or there. We're not in a very volatile market right now as far as interest rates are concerned. So, you know, lock today, lock tomorrow, probably not going to make much of a difference. But, you know, when we do see, hey, it's up and down, I take it today. Like, I will tell them that, but I don't make them lock it. Like, I always put it in their court, 100%.
And if they want to roll the dice, they can wait. They don't have to
Yep.
lock it at any point. Right?
You just have to lock about 5 days before closing.
Yeah.
All right, Hannah. So you have given us a lot of good value here. I appreciate you coming in. For our audience, what's the best way to reach you?
You can text me or call me at the one and only phone number I use, 2248. And then you can always send me an email. The phone number is really the best way to get me. But if you just happen to be a person who loves to email, it is hannah.rogers@movement.com.
Awesome. Well, that is a wrap. I appreciate you coming in with us.
Yep, glad to be here.
That was awesome. Thanks, Ann.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Corey Shields,
Michael Williams.
and we'll see you next time.